Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping right in today because we've got a fascinating and honestly pretty massive topic to unpack. We're looking at a source text that systematically deconstructs a super popular modern idea, religious pluralism. Through a really structured, logical analysis, our source is tackling that age-old question, do all world religions ultimately lead to the exact same destination? Let's dive in and see how they break this down.
So, are all religions the same? In our highly globalized world, that is an incredibly appealing idea, isn't it? I mean, we're interacting with diverse cultures every single day, so it feels tolerant, it feels inclusive to just assume different faiths or basically different paths up the exact same mountain. But the source material we're unpacking challenges this head-on. It asks a pretty vital question. Have we actually listened to what these paths say about themselves, or are we just kind of imposing a unity on them that they explicitly reject?
To get to the bottom of this, the source brings up the famous parable of the blind men and the elephant. You've probably heard this one, right? Several blind men touch different parts of an elephant. One grabs the trunk, one grabs a leg, and they all describe the animal completely differently. The metaphor essentially claims every religion only grabs a tiny piece of the ultimate truth. But our source points out a pretty massive irony here. Think about it. The only reason the narrator knows the blind men are wrong is because the narrator isn't blind. They can see the whole elephant. So, to push this pluralistic view, you ironically have to claim a position of superior objective knowledge over all world religions. You're essentially telling devout followers that they don't actually understand their own faith.
To test this same mountain theory, the source applies a core rule of philosophy, the law of non-contradiction. Simply put, two contradictory claims absolutely cannot both be true in the same sense at the same time. The source uses this as a stress test for the idea that all religions teach the exact same reality. The logic is straightforward. If religion A says God is a personal creator, and religion B says there is no creator God, well, they could certainly both be false, but they literally cannot both be true.
The source builds on this by looking directly at the sacred texts themselves, starting with Islam. Take a look at this text from Surah 385 of the Quran. It says, "And whoever seeks a religion other than Islam, it will never be accepted from him." The source notes that while Islam does respect other people of the book to an extent, its textual exclusivity is absolute. The text explicitly denies the core tenets of Christianity, like the Trinity and the crucifixion of Jesus. Logically speaking, if Islam is true, Christianity's central tenets have to be false. They just can't both be true at the same time. And this kind of exclusivity isn't unique to just one group. Let's look at Judaism's foundation, the Shema, from Deuteronomy 6:4. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." The source highlights how Judaism maintains a very strict monotheism. It explicitly rejects the incarnation of Jesus, it rejects the prophethood of Muhammad, and it demands adherence to God's specific, unique covenant with Israel.
Now, you might be wondering, what about Eastern traditions? Aren't they generally more inclusive? Well, take a look at classical Theravada Buddhism via the Dhammapada. It states, of all the paths, the Eightfold Path is the best. This is the only path. Our source notes that Buddhism actually rejects a personal, eternal creator God entirely. Instead, the Buddha taught a very specific, exclusive path to extinguish desire and escape the cycle of rebirth to achieve nirvana. So once again, we have an exclusive claim about the ultimate nature of reality.
Even Hinduism, which a lot of people in the West view as highly inclusive and accommodating of many deities, makes some pretty explicit ultimate demands in its sacred texts. As paraphrased here from chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita, the text asserts that those who worship other gods with faith are actually worshiping Krishna, but in ignorance. So the source demonstrates that even the traditions that seem the most accommodating still hold strict, exclusive views on what ultimate truth really is. When you map out Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and Hinduism side by side, the source highlights just how fundamentally they diverge on the big questions: ultimate reality, humanity's core problem, and the ultimate solution. We're looking at everything from a personal God to an impersonal force to total non-existence. I mean, is the ultimate reality eternal fellowship, total absorption into an impersonal whole, or the cessation of individual existence entirely? The source uses this mapping to illustrate a stark logical impasse. These are mutually exclusive outcomes, guys. They simply cannot all be true.
Section 2. Testing Truth Claims, the Unique Foundations of Christianity.
So if every religion claims exclusivity and they logically contradict each other, we're kind of stuck at an intellectual stalemate, right? How does the source suggest we navigate this?
Well, the text evaluates these competing claims through historical critical analysis, focusing on how Christianity presents unique claims to objective, testable reality. And that starts with this massive number, 5,800. That's the number of surviving ancient Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. The source argues that absolutely no ancient document in human history comes even close to this level of textual verification. With manuscript fragments dating to just decades after the original writings, the text presents an argument for unparalleled textual reliability, especially when you compare it to other ancient works like Homer or Plato, which often have gaps of several centuries.
Furthermore, the source outlines specific fulfilled prophecies from the Old Testament written centuries before Christ as evidence for historical validation. These include Micah predicting a precise birthplace, Psalm 22 detailing specific crucifixion elements centuries before the Romans even invented that form of punishment, and Isaiah 53, written 700 years prior, describing a sacrifice for sins. The text uses these to argue for an objective, predictive element that it claims is completely unique to this tradition.
Let's move to the historical core of the Christian claim, the resurrection. Here, the source lays out what historians call the minimal facts method. These are points largely agreed upon by critical historians, both religious and secular. We're talking about Jesus' execution under Pilate, the disciples' sincere belief that they actually saw him alive again, the sudden conversion of fierce skeptics like Paul, and the undisputed empty tomb in Jerusalem. The source points out that hallucinations simply don't transform cowardly fishermen into willing martyrs. According to the text, they died for what they sincerely believed they saw with their own two eyes.
Section 3, the ultimate divide, do versus done.
Aside from historical claims, this source points to a fundamental theological divide, a system of do versus a system of done. According to the text, every other world religion basically operates on a system of human achievement, spelled D-O. You perform the pillars, you follow the eightfold path, accumulate karma, keep the laws. You're working your way up to God or nirvana via self-effort, constantly hoping you've done enough. In contrast, the source describes Christianity as spelled D-O-N-E. It's framed as God reaching down to humanity, a divine rescue mission characterized by grace and absolute assurance, rather than an exhausting ladder of human self-effort. This crucial point is perfectly encapsulated in this quote from the Apostle Paul in Ephesians 2:8-9. For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. The source concludes that Christianity at its core is not about mankind climbing a mountain to find a distant, demanding deity. Instead, it's about God coming down the mountain to a broken humanity, offering complete forgiveness as a free gift. Which leaves us with a final provocative question. How do you evaluate the historical and logical truth claims in your own worldview? Our source today heavily challenges the idea that all religions are just different paths up the same mountain. It points out their logical contradictions and highlights the unique historical and grace-based claims of Christianity. Regardless of where you personally stand, it's a fascinating invitation to step back and objectively investigate the foundations of our own beliefs. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep seeking the truth.